Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon session, The Power of Consistently Structuring Your CV. I wanted to talk, first of all, just talk through what we're going to achieve this afternoon, and also what we're not going to achieve. This session is going to be very focused. We're not going to start pulling up lots of copies of great looking CVs and lots of copies of bad looking CVs and saying, oh, your CV could look like this if you do this, because everybody's CV is very different. Everyone's content is different, everyone's history is different, and most importantly, the messages you want to get across are very different. So actually showing you someone else's CV and saying, why didn't you make yours look like that, actually isn't massively helpful. We have found with a lot of the I Got Hired guys over the years. So what we're going to do over the next half an hour or so is to create a generic structure for a CV. It can apply to almost anybody, whatever state you are in your career, however senior the role is or not that you're looking for, whether you're a first jobber or a company director, this structure works. We're then going to take that structure. We're going to talk a little bit briefly about the challenges of tailoring your CV. I think we probably have all heard about the importance of that, but we'll touch on that. Some of the challenges that you face when you try to tailor your CV, and then we'll show how we can use the structure that we built in the first half of today's session to easily and quickly tailor your CV. One of the big problems that we're hearing from a lot of job hunters at the moment is that they have read or they've seen stuff about the importance of tailoring the CV, and it's taking them a day to do it. So on average, they can only get one application out a day, or it's certainly taking them hours. We are going to create a structure that makes it very simple for you to identify where the information is that you can tailor, how you're going to tailor it as well. And we're also within that tailoring, we're going to prioritize information as well, so that it's not just about getting the right information in, but it's about getting that information into the right places. So before any further ado, I'll have a quick slurp of water and then we'll go straight in to the structure. So as you'd expect, all CVs are going to start with your header. This is the place where you have your name. And there's probably only really two jobs of the header, and we see a number of candidates who kind of ram as much information into this head. It's tempting. There's a lot of white space up there. You know the eye is going to fall at the top of the CV. So suddenly it's got your name, and it's got an email address, and it's got maybe a postal address. It's got a mobile number, maybe a home landline. Maybe it's also got your LinkedIn URL, which has real value. However, you want to keep that really clean. Everything we do in I Got Hired, everything we do in the Job Search Accelerator program is about keeping your CV very clean, very professional. Someone described it as sort of Apple-esque, so a lot of white space, very clear, simple fonts, and making sure that when someone is looking for a piece of information, they can find it easily. And the whole point of this consistent structuring is that as a reader goes through your CV, they begin to be trained. Your CV trains them to tell them where the information that they're looking for is going to be, and that if they look in certain places, it's going to be concise, and it's going to be evidence-based, and it's going to be the data that is most appropriate for the role that they're hiring. But in the first point, we're just going to keep this header very clean. So we're going to put our name, and we don't need necessarily to put titles. We don't need to put qualifications unless they are relevant. So if you are a doctor, then yeah, I understand why you may put the initials after your name. But I don't think we need Mr. Mrs. Ms. I don't think we need PhD. So keep it clean, name and one means of contact, just one means of contact, the means of contact you would most like them to use. So you're in control right from the start of how you are going to manage your readers' reaction to your CV, because 80% of the contact will be made to that very top means of contact. So I tend to put an email address. I'd rather they contact me by email than a phone number, and I'll then put my phone number, the number that I want them to use, down in the footer. A quick word about the email address. We are not going to use bigboy@gmail, or in my case, baldy big ears @gmail. We're going to have a very professional email address that we commit specifically for our job hunt. And there's two reasons for that. One, you will have a professional sounding email address. And if you have to go for David or Dawn Smith 27 or 74 or whatever the number is that Gmail plonks on the end of your name, that's not a bad thing. But if you can find a way to construct your email address either with dots or underlines, so that you can, or you use your initials to create a name that Gmail hasn't yet got, that's very beneficial. My Gmail address is just my initials, so that worked well. But we're going to keep it clear. The other reason we have a professional job hunting email address is that it helps you to manage the incoming communications during your job hunt. So you know that when you go to that inbox, you haven't used that email address to sign up for eBay or Amazon or any other website that you may have signed up for to get, a CV template or whatever. You're not going to be inundated with marketing material going into that inbox. You can feel pretty safe, pretty secure in the fact that when you look into that inbox, everything in there is going to be something that you need to read, because it's going to be about your job hunt. So it's likely to be coming from an agent, a member of your network, or an employer. So just those two bits on the header, keeping it really clean. We then move down, and the next thing we have is a title. Tradition would tell us that that title should say something like career history or introduction or career summary or personal statement. All totally valid titles, but have no value to you whatsoever. That title, which is likely, we would put it on the left-hand column, not centered. The header can be centered. The left-hand column, the title you put onto the left-hand margin. That's because that is where the reader's eye goes. We've seen eye tracking technology tells us that that is where a reader's eye will naturally fall, top left-hand corner. It's because they're reading a book, effectively. Any document, you start in the top left-hand corner. So if you are guaranteed that your reader is going to read that line, that title, the first line of your CV, why waste it with something as benign and generic as career history or personal introduction, personal summary? What I would advise is that you use the title of the job that you are applying for, and you put that in the title above. You may now be calling your personal summary, we'll call a solutions summary, and we'll talk about that. But that does a number of things. By getting the title in there early, there is an emotional response from a human reader. They will see a job title that there's already in their mind, it's what they're looking for, and their initial reaction will not be, oh, they've taken the job title from my ad and put it in the title here. It will be, this is what you do. So already you're beginning to mold that reader's thinking into, this is a candidate that could be aligned with what we're looking to hire. So don't waste that title, use it as a sales message and get it in to the left-hand column, and just repeat the title of the job that you're applying for. Solution statement. Now, I said earlier, a lot of people call this personal statement or whatever. The thinking behind the I got hired approach, everything we do is that as a job hunter, we are looking to create a solution to the problem that has driven the employer to hire someone. And that problem could be very complex, it could be very simple, but we are going to evaluate and analyze what is the problem that sits behind an organization's hiring activity, and then we are going to solve that problem for them. That's everything we're doing. It's what our elevator pitch is about. It's what our SWOT analysis has driven us to. When we prepare our interview questions in advance, that's what we're looking to create, is a clear statement that we are the best possible solution that this organization could hire when they're looking to solve the problem that they went to market with. So this personal statement, the solution statement, needs to be created in such a way that it is worded to solve the problem. And a lot of your CV tailoring, your resume tailoring, is going to happen within the solution statement. And we'll talk about that in a little while. It shouldn't be more than maybe 4 or 5 lines tops. You should be using a font of either 10 or 11 size, and you should be using something nice and traditional and crisp. We use a Calibri, sometimes we use Gothic, Century Gothic, something very clean, very crisp, and that when the initial impact of the document, whether it's seen on screen or it's seen hard copy sitting on someone's desk, is that it is a clean, attractive document. So your solution statement goes there. And one thing I will say is that in today's coaching session, we're looking at building this structure. If you want to get more deeply into this subject, I'll give you a link to an hour-and-a-half webinar, our Re-engineering Your Resume webinar, which you can get in a little bit more deeply, and we'll talk more about content. But this should give you a really straightforward basis for the structure and construct of your CV. So now we go to skills, and a lot of people here, I'll just go back, I had to bring skills up to point out where we're not going. And where we are not going is education. We do not waste any content in the top third, the top half of our CV with any information that is not primarily required by the reader. So the only possible reason that you would put your education high and on the first page of your CV is if you are a first jobber, a graduate, where education is indicative of you as a human being as well as you as an intellect. So you've come through a process which has been structured and deliberate, and you've got the qualifications you want to evidence that. And it's a very key part of your sales message. As you leave college or university, it's an absolute cornerstone of your sales message to an employer. So education can come in after your solution statement if you are a first and possibly a second jobber. It can also come there if there is detailed requirement of educational standards in the job description or the job advert that you're responding to. If there is a broad statement of intent, so we are looking for a graduate, or we anticipate the successful candidate being a graduate, don't take up 5, 6, 7 lines, 2, 3 inches on this front page, this really valuable piece of resume real estate with your education, because all they want to know is you're a graduate. So that goes into your solution statement. Simon is a graduate from, or Simon graduated from, or whatever, just that's all you need. You're telling them that is a tick in the box for that particular requirement. If it is a more academic role, or it's a science and research role, or a role where a history of education is important, then it can go there. But we would normally see education at the end of your career details. We then have a skills section. Now, we'll talk about the purpose of the skills section. We'll talk about why we use bullet points in much more detail in the webinar that I've already touched on. But this is going to be somewhere between 6, preferably maybe 8 bullet points of no more than 5 or 6, 7 words, so that you can get 2 bullet points across the width of the page. So the 2 columns of bullet points, you can construct those in a small table and then remove the borders of the table so that the borders of the table get shown and the bullet points come up very clean and tidy. But these are the key skills that someone is hiring you for. And they can be soft skills and they can be technical hard skills. And they may probably are a mix of both, but this is a very key place where you're going to tailor, either by including skills relevant to the role or just juggling the skills about. So you want the primary skills on the left-hand side, but I don't want to go, we'll go into tailoring a little bit later. I shouldn't steal my own thunder before I get there. But so you have this block of 6 or 8 bullet points, and the title is probably key skills. So you're implying that this is not the ultimate complete list of all of your skills, but these are the key skills that you're selling yourself on as a candidate. Below that, and this is really important, and so many people forget this, they'll tell an employer what they're capable of, but what they forget to tell them what they have achieved using those skills. So accomplishments, again, is probably 6, 8 bullets. 6 is preferable. And we're going to talk here about evidential data. And this is really, really important. We are going to use evidential data wherever we can. We're going to use numbers to demonstrate the scale of our accomplishment, the scale of our responsibility, the scale of a business, the impact of our contribution to an organization. So a growth by percentage or revenue, or number of drop-offs achieved on a route, or the speed of drop-offs, or the percentage increase in customer appreciation scores, or the reduction in customer complaints. We're going to use numbers, and we're not going to use numbers willy-nilly. We're going to pick our numbers very carefully, because numbers are incredibly powerful. And when they are combined with a bullet point, they are probably the single easy, most powerful element of your CV. So we're going to pick them carefully. We're not just going to throw any old numbers up there. And we're going to know that we may well be called on those numbers in an interview. So we're going to have our data with us in interviews so that we can give them exact details. But that's really, really important. We'll talk about evidential data all the way through the construct of the CV. We'll be looking for evidential data in the solution statement. There should be at least 2 pieces of evidential data in your solution statement, because it gives it real credibility. The other thing it does as well is almost invariably your CV is being read by a manager of some type, someone who is responsible for the performance management of staff in their team, in their organization, in their department, or whatever. They performance manage on numbers. So all you're doing is you're just showing that you are using their language. Not only do you recognize that your performance is likely to be managed in a pretty black and white numbers binary sort of way, you either hit a target or you don't, you either increase or you don't. Not only are you recognizing that you expect to be managed like that, but you relish it, and you're using those numbers in your CV just to evidence that. So header, title, solution statement, skills bullets, accomplishments bullets, and then we go into our career history. So our career history is the traditional part of the CV. There's a lot of stuff on the internet talking about all these different types of CVs you can have, and ignoring either web-based CVs and even video CVs, etc., etc. We are talking about a relatively traditional document that is going to support a relatively traditional type of recruitment. And within those, people will talk about hybrid CVs, or they'll talk about skills-based CVs. We in I Got Hired deal exclusively in chronological CVs, because I've been in recruitment, I suppose, on and off for, gosh, longer than I care to remember, 30 or 40 years now. And I have never had a client, an HR manager, a hiring manager, a colleague ever come to me and say, I'm uncomfortable with this CV because it is a chronological CV, and I was hoping to get a skills-based CV. I have, on the other hand, numerous occasions had hiring managers and HR directors come back to me and ask me to go back to a candidate and ask them to rewrite their CV from a skills-based CV into a chronological CV. So we work with chronological CVs. It's how most people see a CV. It's how most people think of a CV. So we start with our most recent hire, our most recent role. And we will have, on the left-hand margin, we will have the name of the employer and the job title below it. Over on the right-hand side, which is the margin where the eye hardly ever gets, we will put the period of service. We don't want to jam up the important data of the employer and the job title by adding additional data on the left-hand side. We're looking to create a very clear, clean CV. So we keep that clear. If they are concerned about your period of service, if they are a hiring manager who sees period of service as an indicator of loyalty or commitment or achievement, they can wander over to the right hand side and have a look. But I tell you, 80–90% of people reading your CV are going to be much more interested in who you work for and what the job was that you did. The only possible challenge to that would be if you have had a period of accelerated progression through the same employer, in which case you may want to bring the periods for each role as you go through each promotion over to the left-hand side, just to evidence how quickly you have developed or how quickly you've been promoted through the business. But be very careful you're not jamming up that left-hand margin where so much of the important eye time is spent as someone reads your CV. And then we come to education. I'm going to go back in a moment to career history, but I just want to go through the structure first. So education, keep it relevant is the golden rule. So certainly the highest level of education you achieve should be there. I mean, in the UK, and when you're as old as me, you'll talk about O levels, or if you're a bit younger, GCSEs. Just I don't think that if you're over 30 years old, never mind 40 or 50, people are going to be too concerned about the subjects of those O levels, GCSEs. They're probably not even that bothered about the subjects unless they're specifically relevant to the role. They're not going to be that bothered either about the subjects of your A levels. Yes, your degree, of course, yes, but lower level now. So keep a relevance mind. Keep thinking about how relevant is that educational qualification to where I am today. Is it going to have any bearing? Constantly look at your CV. Try to look at your CV through the lens of the person you're writing it for, as opposed to your own lens as the writer. This CV is not being written for you. Excuse me. This CV is not being written for you. It's being written for whoever is going to read it. So constantly go back and say, well, if I was evaluating me on paper, do I need to know that? Because we're going to keep it clean all the way through. Then finally, we have the footer. And this is really important. Number of things we're going to say about the footer. In the footer, every document system that you're going to work with, Word or whatever system you use, is going to give you the ability to number the pages of your CV. Do it. You don't want someone going from page 1 to page 3 and not realizing they've missed page 2. And for many people, I've just committed the cardinal sin by suggesting that a CV could be 3 pages long. Take it from me, it can be. It's much more important you have the right rules and the right white space and the right titles than you cram it into 2 pages. So in the footer, you're going to put your number, then the page number. You're also going to put your name, so that if for any reason page 2 and page 3 get separated from page 1, they know whose CV it is. You're going to put the means of contact, both the one that you've used at the top. In my case, as I say, it's my email address, but I will also add my mobile phone number. I won't know landline, just a mobile phone number. That's quite sufficient. And I'd probably put my LinkedIn URL in the footer as well. I wouldn't jam that up at the top. Some people do, and I think as long as you're going with your name, email address, and LinkedIn URL in that header, and you put your name in a larger font than the next 2, and you keep it very clean and using a clean font, that's fine. But certainly, I would personally put my LinkedIn profile in the footer. I said I was going to talk about career history again, and this is why I've just skipped past it to come back to it. You are going to use the structure that you've used in that top third of your CV right the way through your career history. So we're going to have the titles, as I say, job title, employer. You should always a 1.5 line descriptor of who that employer is. And if it is an organization that everyone's heard of, Coca-Cola, that's fine, but put in some evidential data that they may not know, because everyone thinks they know how big Coca-Cola is, but they might be surprised by the global revenues of Coca-Cola or the number of people that they hire. or the number of customers that they deal with directly, or whatever that piece of evidential data is. Drop that into the description, just so there's some value in reading it for the reader. And that's no more than a line and a half. You then can have another line and a half describing the primary raison d'etre for the role. Why does the role exist? In one little nutshell, one sentence, two sentences at tops. What was the purpose of the role? Why were you there? Why did they hire you? Why did the role exist? And then align your skills and accomplishments, the skills you used in the role and the accomplishments you achieved in the role, in that same format that you've used higher up. So fundamentally, your employer and role description amounts to your solution statement. And then you have a skills set of bullet points and an accomplishment set of bullet points. And that's it. People will often put things about why they left. They can ask that in an interview. It's not going to that's not going to have any bearing at all in whether they hire you or not. I'm sorry, whether they interview. It might have a bearing on whether they hire you, excuse me. They'll have no bearing on whether they interview you or not. So keeping, again, only the relevant information through your CV. And that is the basic structure. I don't know a candidate that I've worked with, to be honest, in the last 3-4 years when I got hired, or within the Job Search Accelerator program, whose CV could not benefit from using that simple structure. And when you align it, you apply some of our golden rules, and we take the photographs out, for example, and we use a clean font, and we don't use colors, and we're careful on how we emphasize data. So we never use more than 2 emphasis tactics at any one time. So underline and bold is fine, but underline, bold, and italic gets a little bit out of hand. Once we've applied those rules, we have a strong, clean, easy to read CV, and it's a CV that the reader knows where the data is he wants. You train him in the top half of the first page that you're going to have skills and accomplishment bullet points. You're going to have a descriptor, and then you're going to have skills and accomplishments, descriptor, skills and accomplishments, skills and accomplishments, and that's what he is going to, or she is going to be used to as they work their way through your CV. So that is the fundamental, I got hired, simple as chips structure, and it, as I say, applies to every CV that I worked for the last 3 or 4 years. And that part is the bit that is so important. Keep repeating those skills and accomplishment bullets. We talk in great detail about the power of bullets. There's really interesting research about the psychology of the way the mind, the human eye, reacts to a bullet point. It almost is incapable of not reading it. So use bullet points, use them sparingly, and then use them in the right order. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're now going to talk about how we can use that structure to tailor the CV. But we're going to start off with, and I'm going to rush through this a little bit because it's probably worth a session on its own, but I don't think I can go into how you tailor your CV unless we've at least touched on some of the challenges that tailoring your CV will create. And we've all heard about the dreaded applicant tracking system, which is the ATS, but we also have to satisfy and impress the AHB, as we call it. I should just move myself out of there so you can just see that. Put that there. There we go. The AHB, that's the actual human being. So one document is going to have to satisfy, please, and answer the queries and the subconscious concerns of the human being, whilst also satisfying the needs of an applicant tracking system. I don't think we should overplay the applicant tracking system either, because I think there is a potential that we, as an industry, are trying to build the applicant tracking system into this terrible thing we should all be horribly frightened of. And in fact, it's been around for as long as I can. I mean, gosh, I was certainly using it at the turn of the century. That's how old I am. I thought that may sound old, but that's, they've been around a long time. They're reputed to be used by 90% of employers. I don't believe that is true. It can't be true, because you just look at the size of 75% of employers in the UK and 85% of employers in the States. They're employing less than 50 people. These companies are not using artificially intelligent applicant tracking systems. So that number's just been inflated to get us all concerned and make sure that we use professionals to write our CVs. and it's not necessarily true. They will say that 75% of resumes are rejected. How do we know that? Saying that 75% of resumes are rejected because they're not correctly formatted or keyword optimized. There is no way my industry knows that to be a fact. And yet I found that, I don't know, 20, 30 times when I was preparing for today's session. So applicant tracking system is important. Yes, it is designed to scan a resume for work experience, skills, education, other relevant information hiring managers might require against predefined criteria. And you plug that criteria into the system, and then it will order or reject CVs against this criteria. Absolutely, that's what it does. But it is not as great a challenge as our industry is trying to make it out to be. I've seen some horrendous stuff on LinkedIn and Facebook about creating ATS compliant CVs, which, to be honest, they might get through the ATS, but by the time they land on the desk of a hiring manager, they're going to look at this lump of unformatted base data and reject it, because they're not going to bother to work through it. They're not going to be impressed by the person who might own that CV. So we're not going to allow ourselves to get terrified by the ATS, but at the same time, we're just going to bear in mind we have to play the game by the ATS's rules. When you look at the actual human being, the second group are going to evaluate you as a candidate. This is much more interesting, much more fun. So this is repeated. It's repeated that they only spend 6 or 8 seconds on a CV before rejecting or accepting your CV. That's not true, by the way, and we talk about that at some length in the webinar. What they actually do is they read your CV in 6 or 8 second lumps. So every 6 or 8 seconds, they decide whether they're going to commit another 6 or 8 seconds to your CV. And so you have to construct your CV, and the structure we've just gone through does this very well. You have to construct your CV so that every 6 or 8 seconds, however they read it, you've teased them enough to give them another 6, for them to give you another 6 or 8 seconds, another 6 or 8 seconds, or so on. So the impact of that 6 or 8 seconds rule isn't that you have to make your case in 6 or 8 seconds. It is that you have to keep making a case every 6 or 8 seconds so that they get through your CV. The human being is also infamously inconsistent and prone to intellectual lapses. Oh yeah, I'm down one of those, that may lead to gut feel or emotional decision making. And they're very open to the influence of personal agendas. And there's little, if anything, we can do about that. There may be some clues in a job description or an advert that may make us think, okay, so if this is written by the hiring manager, they are particularly looking for this. So and I've got that. So I need to up that in my CV. I need to make a stronger case for that. But a lot of those personal agendas we can't identify. But the real challenge of the actual human being is that despite all these human weaknesses, they are the final arbiter of fact, and they are the key decision maker in the hiring process. So it is absolutely key that we write our CVs to ensure that the facts they arbit and the key decision that they make is in our favor. That's really important. And so in our view, the human being is a much more important evaluator than the ATS. We can play the ATS game, and we talk about that, and it's quite easy to do. But the beating or impressing the actual human being and making sure that you're on the right side of their decision-making process is so much more important. So as I said, the challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to find a winning compromise. So we're going to create one document that will satisfy both of these evaluators, and it really isn't an impossible mission. Because if you look at what an applicant tracking system and an actual human being like, what they respond well to, they're both going to like clean formatting, but for different reasons. So the ATS is going to like clean formatting because it can see the data. Through its computer eye, it can see the data. That's why it also likes simple structure. Now, a human being's emotional response to a clean, crisp document with lots of white space around the key messages is well documented. You just have to look at what advertising agencies do. Look at Apple, look at any advert that you see in a magazine or on television or on the internet. Loads and loads of white space around the key message because it draws the eye to the key message. So both the ATS and the human being likes that too. Neither of them like bells and whistles. The ATS hates boxes and shaded areas and pictures and tables and diagrams. all of those things that make it difficult for the ATSI to find the data it's looking for. Human beings don't like them because they just look complicated. And when you are working through 20 or 30 CVs that have been passed you through your internal recruitment function, the last thing you want is complicated. You want something where you can see the information you need, you can see it quickly. No one is going to be impressed that you can do something really clever with the structure of your CV, because they're going to think it's a template anyway. So keep it really clean, keep it traditional. Don't fall into the trap. The internet is just full of these beautiful templates, big boxes and wide margins that you're meant to be able to squeeze 2 or 3 words in a line down the left-hand side, and lightning bolts. And also step away from that. Stay simple, stay conservative, stay traditional. That's what people respond to, and they respond to logically organized information. So that's what we've talked about in the repetitive structure going through our CV, is this logically organized, repetitive structure to the CV, so they know where they're going to find the data they want. And then they want relevant content. The ATS wants relevant content in the dreaded keyword. We've all heard about the keyword, but the actual human being, you're going to play to them through key phrases. So keywords are picked up. They would, a hiring manager or an internal recruiter will say, here are the 6, 7, 8, 10 words that I need to see in a CV. And the more times it appears logically, we're not talking about sort of loading the CV with the logical phrases to get these keywords in, the more likely I'm going to like that CV. But the human being is going to respond really well if you flatter them slightly by feeding their words back to them. So feed key phrases rather than words. Look at the way that the keywords are embedded into repeated sentences in a job description or in a job advert, and feed those back, particularly in your solution statement, and particularly in those the early bullet points as you go through. Using phrases, 4, 5, 6 word phrases that have been repeated in the job spec has an incredible impact on hiring managers. I've had hiring managers come to me and say, this guy's perfect. Look, he even uses this phrase when he's describing the way he does management accounting or whatever it was. So don't just fall into the trap of keywords, because that's it. Keywords, keywords, keywords. It's all over the internet, particularly with the ATS CV, but generally but don't forget that a word is nothing more than a part of a phrase, and a phrase is nothing more than a part of a sentence. So we're going to build phrases and sentences that our hiring managers want to see, and that will have real impact as you go forward. A quick word, and this is a terrible word, not the best cartoon we've ever used to illustrate a point. Think long and hard before you pay someone to write your CV. It's been a real bugbear for me for years. I don't understand it. We're talking to people about how they must tailor, how they must personalize their CVs, and then people are going to a CV writer and getting a great CV written that for the very next job is inappropriate and is not optimized. There are a lot of good CV writers out there, great communicators, wordsmiths who create great phrases. And if you are really stuck and you want to spend £300, £400, £500 or dollars getting your resume written, okay, I understand that, but be really careful. As with career coaches, suddenly every recruiter who isn't placing anyone at the moment in the market has become a career recruiter. Some of them are great and really, really good at it. Some of them are seeing the market through the one-eyed lens of a recruitment consultant. They've never been a hiring manager. They haven't worked inside a hiring organization. It's a long time since they've been a candidate, and all they've ever been is hired for a recruitment job. So you need someone who has a multi-lens view of the world. Personally, I would say you also, in this current market, you need someone who's doing this job in the 2008 recession, because they understand what the market is. But this cartoon is there to say, just be careful before you invest good money in writing a CV, because I got hired. We believe we can teach you, and we can give you tools, and we can give you a structure, and it will save you a fortune. And the Job Search Accelerator program is currently on the market for £47, $57 for the complete end-to-end, 5 days a week, live coaching, 120 lessons, 20 hours of recorded video on demand, and umpteen templates and checklists. So if you get that for $57, £47, £47, I just wonder how someone can justify £200 or £300 for writing your CV. So just be careful. I'm going to get beaten up by a lot of CV writers, many of whom I know, and I apologise for now, but it's my opinion. So let's just go how we are going to use the structure to create a content-rich, content-relevant CV for any role. We talked on it before on the header. This is kind of a place you can't really do any tailoring because it's all factual, but keep it clean, plenty of white space, keep it centered. You use your job hunt campaign email and possibly your LinkedIn URL, and that's it. That's a nice consistent part of your CV. You'll never touch that again. Then we get into your title. So this is 100% tailored. So what we do with I Got Hired Guys is we create a color-coded core CV. And in there are 3 colors. There is the stuff that is specifically identified as potential for tailoring. So this would be one of them. That the title of your solution statement reflecting the job you're appealing for is 100% tailorable. So we have that. We then have the stuff that is core to the central message, the central being of the candidate as such, if that doesn't sound too sort of grandiose and fluffy. But that's stuff that is the candidate, and that's the stuff that's always going to be in the CV. It may move a little bit, but it's always going to be there. And then we have the stuff that is vague. You could take it out, you could replace it, you could possibly tailor it. If we then go into the solution statement, this can be significantly tailored and evidence-based. Go back to that point about evidential data. 2 pieces of evidential data, up to about 50% of the statement can be tailored to raise key alignments with a job description or a job advert. And that is using these statements and phrases rather than just pure words. It's really important. This is the most read part. When a hiring manager or recruiter is spending about 6 or 8 seconds making the evaluation whether you're going to invest more time in your CV, they will almost invariably scan read your solution statement, and the words and the phrases they are looking for will jump out of the page, jump out of the screen at them if you can get it into that solution statement. Crafting that solution statement can often take 30% of the time of the whole of the tailoring exercise. Getting it right and getting evidential-based numbers in there as well, really, really important. So skills, we're talking about 4 to 6, maybe 6 to 8 bullets. I think 4 to 6 is better. So I was wrong earlier. It's 4 to 6 bullets, sorry. At least 3 of those bullets should be aligned directly with the skills that are identified in the job description. If you are the perfect candidate and all of your skills are aligned, then that's great. But I think 3 skills, a minimum of 3 skills, should be significantly aligned with the skills in the job description or the job advert. And you can move these bullets around. Bullets don't, when you are replacing one skill with another, you don't have to replace it where the ones come out. The key skill should be on the left-hand column of your bullets, and the most important skill, the skill that is either identified as the crucial skill or is repeated the most in the job description or the job advert, is your top left-hand bullet. Same again, almost word for word for your accomplishments. They will identify the accomplishments that they are going to evaluate candidates on in the job description. It doesn't take a lot to look for them. They stick out like a sore thumb, and you need to find ways that you can evidence your accomplishments in those same things. So whether it's about reducing cost or increasing sales or increasing drops or increasing the number of phone calls taken or made, or whatever it is, whatever the evaluating accomplishment is, make sure that it sits there and it's the top left-hand corner, and you're getting, again, another 3 aligned as a minimum. So career history, this is only partially tailored. You have to be really careful when you start getting into your career history. As we said earlier, short role descriptor, so not mentioned there, also the short description of the organization, but then short role descriptor, key accomplishment bullets, aligned with the key phrases from the job spec, but consider the relevancy of your history. Make sure your career history doesn't go back any further than it needs to. It doesn't. If you were, an office administrator 15, 20 years ago, and you're now applying for a HR director role, how relevant is what you were doing 15 or 20 years ago? If you are concerned about your age, why even include those roles? They have no bearing. They are not going to hire you because of those roles. A catch-all sentence of, Simon fulfilled a number of roles in internationally traded recruitment consultancies previous to this. That sort of phrase works really well. But what we're not going to say, we're not going to lie about our history. We are not going to mislead about our history. We're going to work on the basis that everything in our CV can be referenced, and we're going to be honest about it. And that's another thing. If there's a gap in everyone can't believe how many videos and blogs there are about trying to cover up a gap in your CV. Do you really think hiring managers and recruiters are that stupid they won't see it? And if they think you're being dishonest, that is 10 times worse than the gap is likely to be. Be honest about it. There was a long blog I read the other day about trying to explain why you take a career break to have children. You take a career break to have children. That's the explanation. And if it's not good enough for an organization, you should be questioning whether you want to work for them. Let's not try to come up with clever hacks and tricks and to get around some of the weaknesses in our CV. Instead, spend that time working on an explanation as to what you have done since then, since that weakness was demonstrated. What have you done in your campaign of continuous improvement of yourself to say, yes, I made a mistake, or I had a gap, or I made it, but since then I have done this. You can turn a weakness into a strength so easily by making it a developmental issue in your career. So no lies, no clever hacks, no tricks, honesty right the way from start to finish. Because if you're caught out trying to be clever, trying to hack your way through your CV in an interview, that's going to hang around your neck an awful lot more than a gap. Your education, again, the only real piece here, or two important things. One, make sure you, especially if you're getting old like me, remembering what GCSEs, or O levels in my case, what were my grades at A level? I think I know the subjects, but what were my grades? They might be relevant. Make sure you get that right, because if you get it wrong, probably the employer won't care whether you got a B and you said you got an A, or you got a C and you said you got a B. They're going to be worried about either the dishonesty that represents that statement, or the lack of accuracy, the lack of research, the lack of attention to detail. So get your education absolutely right, but only include the relevant academics. So if you're looking at continuous personal development stuff, and you may have worked for an organization where you're constantly offered courses and developing your skills, etc., be very careful. Make sure that where you include any continuous personal development, CPD stuff, it is relevant to the role that you are hiring. Don't fog your CV up with irrelevant academics, and don't go back too far, and don't include your 25-yard breaststroke. If it's not relevant to the job, then what is it doing on your CV? If it's not going to help you sell you as a perfect solution to the problem they're hiring on, what is it doing on your CV? So relevance, very, very important, and place towards the end of your CV, unless your education is a key decider, a key criteria of the hire. Finally, your footer, we've talked about that, page numbers on the right-hand side, all your contact details, your name again, and probably a much smaller font. So 50 to 75% of the size of the font that you've used elsewhere in the document, no bold, centered, nice, neat, clean. And that fundamentally is how you write a CV. Now that sounds slightly dismissive. I know writing a CV is a difficult, complex business, and it's particularly difficult and particularly complex and particularly challenging and scary in a market where we're not seeing as many opportunities as we would like. And so we feel that when we find the right opportunity, our CV has to do our job. But what we have gone through today in the last 50 minutes gives you a phenomenally simple, straightforward, repetitive, clean structure for the data you are going to use to present your solution to an employer's problems. And as I said earlier, we get much more into the detail behind some of this stuff. Some of it you will recognize because some of this has come from this masterclass, but we get into it in more detail, and we look at these 7 simple steps that you could take literally within an hour of listening to the masterclass to create a CV that's fit for this 2020 market. We know how horrible this 2020 market is. We understand the challenges it is creating for job hunters. We talk about differentiation is in the detail, and it couldn't be truer in a market like this. You have got to get every little small benefit that you can possibly eke out of your CV, get it into your CV, and I wish you all the very, very, very best of luck. Check out the webinar, or by all means have a look at the page for the Job Search Accelerator. That is www.igothiredcoaching.com/jobs search accelerator. Have a look at that, see if we can help you there. It's been a pleasure going through this. Got another one coming up again at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I hope to see you then. We'll be sending out the replay link for anyone who's joined us and wants to have another look at this. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Cheers. Bye.